It's an honor to be here with you today. I didn't realize we were going to show the video, but that's actually very helpful because I'm going to talk to you today about why I think we are on the cusp of a golden era of mid-sized cities, which includes cities like Fargo and Wichita, the other city that was honored in Bentonville recently. I'll talk a little more about that. So I am Tim Kelly. I'm very proud to be the 66th mayor of the city of Chattanooga. And we are we're a mid-sized city, as you know, in the southeast corner of Tennessee. We're only the fourth largest city in the state, down on the Georgia border, about halfway between Nashville and Atlanta, 120 miles in either direction. And at about 190,000 residents, we're roughly the size of Fargo. But despite our small size, I am here to tell you again why I believe we're entering a golden era for cities like ours. So as the video mentioned, imagine you were just a little fella growing up in your mid-sized city. And America's favorite news anchor, Walter Cronkite, announces to the world on national television that you live in the dirtiest city in America. That was my reality. And growing up, my peers and I in Chattanooga, frankly, just were not proud to live there. It was not a place, it was a good place to be from, let's put it that way. Like everyone else in mid-sized cities that I've met as an adult, we wanted out. If you were talented and smart, you didn't stay. You did not stick around because all the action was in the big cities. We had our noses pressed against the glass. For me, it was Atlanta and New York. For you, maybe Minneapolis or Chicago. And if you could leave, again, you did leave. And I did. After high school, I left and went to New York City, went to Columbia University, and never thought I was going to come back. I did come back, somewhat under protest, to run a family business. But I'm glad I did, because Chattanooga's renaissance was just getting underway. You heard a little about in the video, but I'm going to tell you more. After that low point of Walter Cronkite's pronouncement, a group of local residents came together in the mid-'80s to form what we called Chattanooga Ventures. And that really began with turning back towards the Tennessee River. It was a fantastic video. But I got to tell you, as a child growing up in Chattanooga, we never played in or around the river. We just drove over it on those bridges you see. But that effort, that collaborative effort, produced the Tennessee Aquarium, the world's first freshwater aquarium, which is now world-renowned. We built 13 miles of riverwalk along the Tennessee River there, which is now the centerpiece of our recreational assets. And fast forward 50 years from Walter Cronkite's pronouncement, we were just named the first national park city in North America. So you might be wondering how I wound up mayor in the first place. Well, I never ran for student council growing up. I didn't care a thing about politics. Honestly, I still don't. But I had invested my life in Chattanooga. I had become the chairman of our community foundation. And it's a bit like working in the nonprofit world. And I know Joe and Greg and folks I've met here. It's like being in the front row of the bleachers. And you really, the only place to go from there is onto the field. And that's what happened. And I read a book in 2016 called The New Localism. And the thesis of this book, which I would recommend to all of you, is that cities have more power now than they've ever had because of these revolutions in technology and finance to advance human progress. And it's not hard to think of the world as a network of cities. 90% of the GDP in the world is produced in cities. The vast majority of innovation is produced in cities. And cities themselves are arguably our greatest human invention. And I saw the potential in Chattanooga. I knew we were good at problem solving, and we had some big problems yet to solve. So I decided to run for mayor because I really believed that Chattanooga could be the best city in America. Not just the best mid-sized city. We had a former mayor that said that. But the best city, because I have come to believe now that mid-sized cities have the opportunity to be the best cities. And there's actually precedent for this. Athens, Greece. The Athens, Greece of Aristotle and the seat of democracy was, in fact, the cradle of Western civilization was a mid-sized city. Had about 200,000 residents, about the size of Fargo and Chattanooga. So this is not a crazy idea, not entirely crazy. So if this is the cusp of an era of mid-sized cities, then you might ask yourself why. Well, Sarah Morgan in the video mentioned this, but I really think it has to do with being just right. The Goldilocks zone. Big enough to matter, big enough to make an impact and forge policies that the rest of the world can learn from, but small enough to participate in and manage. And in short, it really boils down to what we broadly call quality of life. But what does that even mean? I mean, we probably ought to spend some time, in fact I will here, trying to unpack that and define it a little bit. And again, I am only here because I met Greg and Joe Burgum in Bentonville at the Heartland Forward Summit in Bentonville, which is another great mid-sized city. And it got me really thinking about we ought to be a lot more intentional about defining what this secret sauce is. When I came into office in 2021, COVID pandemic was in full swing, and I began to notice this really interesting phenomenon. I kept bumping into people from bigger cities who were moving into Chattanooga. And at first I thought, this is strange, and then I realized it was a pattern. And then it hit me that quality of life was why they were there, and that quality of life is the new coin of the realm. Because if you can work from anywhere, why would you not live and work in the place with the best quality of life? As you also saw in the video, we have super fast internet in Chattanooga. That certainly helped. A lot of people moved there because they could work remotely. Of course, that's true here and many other mid-sized cities as well. So we surveyed all these new people that came in and found, in fact, that our outdoor assets that you saw, our super fast fiber, and our proximity to larger metros, but not being in those larger metros was what was so important. Those advantages are what brought people to Chattanooga, but to steal Heartland Ford's phrase, I think there's a secret sauce that keeps people in Chattanooga that all mid-sized cities, including Fargo, can take advantage of and should be more intentional about. And that's this, what I would call civic infrastructure. That's not physical infrastructure, it's not our roads and bridges, it is cultural, it is social, but it is composed, I think, largely of these three elements: agency, abundance, and assembly. I'll walk you through those. So first, probably most, importantly, I know you guys know about this, is agency, right? Walter Cronkite didn't fix Chattanooga's problems. We fixed Chattanooga's problems in Chattanooga. We rolled up our sleeves and did it. And I was, played some part in that comeback, certainly do now, trying to keep it rolling. But I can say without a doubt that this is a critical part because it allows us to get shit done. And what does it mean, agency? Well, I mean, again, it means that we can come together and get things done, but it's also really important to think about at the individual level, because it also means that you, as an individual resident of your city, can get plugged in. You can get plugged in and feel a sense of control over your own life, which I think increasingly is critical to being happy, to mental health, and to quality of life. And again, this is worth thinking about in the context of cities across different spectrums. Small cities agency is not really a problem. Just show up at a Hardee's on a Saturday morning. You can find a project to get involved in. But is it going to be consequential to humankind? Maybe not. In larger cities, agency is an issue. I mean, I've lived in New York. I have a lot of friends and in larger cities across the country and across the world, and the sense of alienation and disconnection is a real problem there. Again, huge advantage for mid-sized cities. Abundance is another big element and an opportunity for mid-sized cities. There's a lot said about this. There's been a lot of books written, you've probably heard if you follow politics at all, about the abundance movement. Because as a society, and certainly as government, we need to prove that we can solve big problems, realizing that if we're creative and integrative in our approach to problem solving, we absolutely can solve big problems. Not a big problem for smaller cities, but again, not a lot of consequence. But in big cities, the urban density, I think, compounds this anxiety about resource shortages, which can really support stifling regulation, the inability or unwillingness to adopt a growth mindset. And we see this play out, in the worst instances as NIMBYism, killing the ability to do key infrastructure investments and solve, for example, our affordable housing crisis, which is very, very real and mayors are struggling with across this country. We've got to get back to well-being for people and realizing that if we work hard and figure it out, there is enough for everybody. And that's, again, a huge advantage for mid-sized cities. And finally, assembly. I'll explain the Ferrari in a minute. But this, I would say, is really best understood as just community over competition. You heard a bit about that in the video. I like to say we over me. Because I hear from people who move to Chattanooga all the time from larger markets who've had this simple realization that there's more to life than chasing the biggest paycheck from the biggest corporation and maximizing material wealth. I'm a Rotarian. Look, we're really good at collaborating in Chattanooga, and I think people that realize that the highest calling really is service over self is kind of key to this concept. That guy in the video, David Littlejohn, told me recently the most amazing thing, he came from Chicago, the most amazing thing about Chattanooga to him is that anybody will have a cup of coffee with you. And that, I think, is true. I've had a lot of cup of coffees with very strange people. And I'm happy happy to do it. Welcome them to Chattanooga and see if I can help them get plugged in. And if you really want to pursue a big idea in Chattanooga, you can meet anybody you need to meet within a week. The reason that's up there is because we don't have a Ferrari dealership in Chattanooga, and I love that about Chattanooga. So being good at assembly is not just a strength for mid-sized cities. It's more important now to politics than ever, because democracy is a little on the rocks. The sad fact is, this is actually another TED Talk that I'm not going to do right now, but we now know beyond the shadow of a doubt that hate sells better than love. It's a real problem. And it's not a conspiracy. We live in a market-driven media environment where everybody's just trying to run the most efficient ad budget. And if you're in charge of the ad budget, those hate clicks sell better than the love clicks. They do. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a systemic flaw. But as leaders, as civic leaders, mayors and community leaders, we have a responsibility to counteract this phenomenon. And that's why public events like parks and music in parks are so important to this concept of assembly. And it's a big strength again, looking forward to being downtown later and seeing it blocked off. It's a big thing that we can do in mid-sized cities that others can't quite as well. At these events, I always ask people to turn to their left and their right, because Chattanooga is a very diverse city, and say, introduce yourself to somebody that doesn't look like you and think you might not think that you agree with, because you always find, that you have more in common than you do that separates you, which is what you'll get if you watch the television all day. Another key element of assembly is sports. And I was very privileged to be a co-founder at our own now professional soccer club, Chattanooga FC. When we founded this club, my co-founders and I just love community. We really love soccer. And it's been a remarkable thing and an illustration of this strength. The mission to this day, even as a professional club, is to use the sport to build community, to build a stronger community. And it's, again, remarkable. We hosted the largest amateur crowd ever to see an amateur soccer match in the United States, like 18,000 people when we were amateur. We were the first club since the Green Bay Packers, first sports club in the U.S. to use equity crowdfunding to offer community ownership to the club. And what's probably most remarkable about this is the people you see behind me call themselves the Chattahooligans. For those of you that may be English soccer fans, it's a good thing. They don't have smoke bombs. They blow bubbles in the sand. But they were not even soccer fans when they started coming to games. They were Chattanooga fans that were just looking for a way to express their love of place. And again, this has the added advantage of meaning that my favorite sports team is no longer in a faraway city that I don't live in. So that's great. And a big advantage, this concept of community-owned sports teams for big-sized cities. So in closing, this is my challenge to you. Be the best version of your mid-sized city. You may not have the world's fastest internet, you may not have this or that, but those three elements of agency and abundance and assembly, any mid-sized city can access those as strengths. When the famous entrepreneur Gary Vaynerchuk visited Chattanooga, he opened a marketing firm there to focus on smaller markets and mid-sized cities. This was about 2015, and I remember meeting him, and I wanted all this advice about how can we be more like LA or New York or these hot cities, and he said, stop. Stop. We've got those already. That's not why we're here. We're here because Chattanooga is great, and you need to focus on being the best version of yourself. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, but I've come to realize that he was onto something there. Another thing I hear all the time in Chattanooga is people come up to me and say, Chattanooga reminds me of Austin 30 years ago. And I'll say, that's great. The trick is to keep it Austin 30 years ago. But look, I think we can do that by focusing in our mid-sized cities on this concept of agency, being very intentional about preserving and enhancing agency and abundance and assembly. Because when it comes to cities, look, bigger is not better. Better is better. Thank you.